The decontamination chamber on Station Verath 9 smelled like burned copper and something else, something biological that the environmental filters hadn't quite managed to categorize. Specialist Lena Johal had been standing in it for 4 minutes, which was 3 minutes longer than the posted maximum exposure time, because the Verath customs officer on the other side of the glass had stopped moving. Not dead, Johal had checked. The officer of Verath, roughly 2 meters of iridescent chitin and compound eyes the color of deep water, had simply ceased processing her. Its antennae were flat against its thorax. Its translation collar emitted a low, sustained tone that her own collar rendered as query suspended. She had filled out the forms correctly. She had triple-checked 12 pages of diplomatic transit documentation for a bilateral cultural exchange that had taken the UN Xeno Relations Office 4 years to negotiate. She was, on paper, the least threatening human being ever to approach Verath space. Xenobiologist, unarmed, alone, authorized. "Is there a problem?" she asked. The collar translated. The officer's antennae moved slightly. The response tone was query suspended. Johal set her bag down and sat on the floor of the decontamination chamber. The floor was cold through her uniform. She took out her field notebook, actual paper, which she used because alien sensor systems were sometimes confused by electronic devices, and she had learned not to create confusion, and she started writing her notes from the transit. The smell, the color temperature of the lighting, the hum of the station's life support at a frequency that was slightly too low for comfortable hearing. After 11 minutes, the glass partition slid open. The customs officer stood to one side. Next to it stood something she had not expected. She was Verath, the same iridescent chitin, the same compound eyes, but she stood differently. The posture was not the flat-limbed efficiency of a functionary. There was something in the angle of her thorax, the way her secondary arms were positioned, that Johal recognized from her reading as high-caste formal attention, the kind of attention that costs something to give. Her translation collar was newer than the officer's. The voice it generated was lower, more precise. "You sat down," she said. "The floor seemed stable," Johal said. "I wasn't going anywhere. No human diplomat has sat on the floor of our intake chamber. I wasn't sure how long I'd be standing there." The Verath female's antennae moved in a pattern that Johal's notes identified as RECLIBRATNG. "You were not distressed." "I was a little distressed," Johal said, standing and picking up her bag, "but sitting helped." There was a pause. The translation collar was silent for a moment longer than language required. "I am Keth Alavar," the Verath said. "I am the third daughter of the Alavar line, which holds jurisdiction over this station and the 6 systems it serves. You have been assigned to my household for the duration of your exchange." A pause. "You were supposed to be a delegation of 4. The others had scheduling conflicts," Johal said. It was diplomatic language for 3 separate bureaucratic failures that she had stopped trying to explain. "I'm the whole delegation." Kethalavar's antennae moved again. This time the pattern was one Johal didn't have in her notes. "One human," Kethalavar said, "to represent your species in a formal cultural exchange with the Alavar jurisdiction. I brought very thorough documentation." The pause this time was longer. "Then come." The Alavar household occupied the station's upper tier, which was pressurized at a slightly higher oxygen content than the lower levels. Johal's lungs noticed. Not unpleasantly, just the way a person notices a room is warm when they step in from cold air. A data point. Kethalavar walked fast. Johal kept pace without difficulty. They passed through 6 corridors, 2 pressure seals, and what appeared to be a garden, low-gravity, bioluminescent plants in shades that didn't exist in human color vocabulary. Johal noted them. She would need new words. "You stare at the cultivation bay," Kethalavar said without turning. "I've never seen that color before," Johal said. "It is common." Not to me. Another pause. You are not what we prepared for. Johal considered that. What did you prepare for? A delegation that would require formal reception, protocols, hierarchy establishment. We have a full schedule of structured. I can do protocols, Johal said. I studied your reception etiquette for 8 months. You studied it. And your dietary prohibitions, your harmonic greeting forms, your caste address system, and approximately 40 hours of recorded Verath social interaction. She paused. I'm still going to get things wrong, but I'll get them wrong accurately. Kethalavar stopped walking. She turned a full rotation, which Verath didn't do unless they wanted to see something with all 6 of their forward visual receptors. She looked at Johal for 4 seconds. You are nervous, she said. Yes. You hide it efficiently. I don't actually, Johal said. I just don't let it stop me. Her quarters were small and functional, and had a viewport that looked directly at the star the station orbited, a yellow-white dwarf, Verath class, close enough that the light had real warmth to it. Johal stood at the viewport for 20 minutes before she unpacked. She had learned this about herself. She needed to locate the light source before she could settle anywhere. It was something her mother had called a navigator's reflex, and something her therapist had called low-grade anxiety, and something she herself called being practical. She wrote notes. She unpacked. She slept 6 hours and woke up 2 minutes before her alarm. The first formal meeting was at the 9th hour, station time. She arrived at the 8th hour, 43rd minute, because she had miscalculated the corridor distance. She stood outside the meeting chamber and waited. At the 8th hour, 58th minute, the door opened. Kethalavar stood in the entrance. Behind her were 3 other high-caste Verath in full formal positioning, all secondary arms folded, all antennae at greeting angle. The room was arranged for 12 participants, not 2. You are early, Kethalavar said. I got the distance wrong. No human delegation has ever arrived before the hour. I didn't want to be late, Johal said. Being late felt rude. Another long pause. Kethalavar's antennae moved in the pattern Johal still didn't have a translation for. Come in, she said. We will begin. 3 weeks into the exchange, Johal had attended 16 formal sessions, eaten 11 diplomatic meals, where she had correctly avoided 4 separate categories of prohibited substance, and made 8 documented protocol errors, all of which she had immediately acknowledged, and which Kethalavar had noted in what appeared to be a record she kept herself. She had also, on 6 separate occasions, spent time in the cultivation bay alone, taking notes on the plants. On the 7th occasion, she found Kethalavar already there. The princess, Johal had started thinking of her as a princess, which was not technically accurate but was the closest human category, was standing at the center of the bay, her secondary arms extended toward a cluster of the bioluminescent growths. Not touching, just extended. The posture was different from anything Johal had seen her adopt in formal settings. I didn't mean to interrupt, Johal said. You did not. Kethalavar did not turn. Sit. Johal sat on the edge of the raised bed the plants grew from. The bioluminescence pulsed slightly. She had begun to suspect it was not purely biological, that there was something electrical in the substrate, but she hadn't asked yet. They pulse faster when there is another presence in the bay, Kethalavar said. I noticed that. Most visitors do not. Johal looked at the pattern. It was rhythmic, approximately 68 beats per minute, give or take. It matches a resting human heart rate, she said. Kethalavar turned. 6 forward visual receptors, 4 seconds. That is not possible, she said. The cultivation strain predates human contact by 700 years. I didn't say it was causal, Johal said, just that it matches. Coincidences are interesting. The princess was quiet for a long time. The bioluminescence pulsed, 68 beats per minute. You find everything interesting, Kethalavar said. It was not a question. It was something else, an observation made carefully, as if she were adding it to a record she kept in her own mind. It's a survival reflex, Johal said. If everything is interesting, nothing is frightening. Is that true? Partially. Kethalavar moved to sit beside her, not the practiced formal proximity of diplomatic sessions, but the unstructured nearness of two people in a room with nowhere else to be. Her chitin caught the bioluminescent light and scattered it in directions Johal's eyes weren't designed to interpret. The exchange ends in 11 days, Kethalavar said. I know. Your documentation has been thorough. Thank you. That is not, she stopped. Her antennae moved. The pattern was the one Johal still hadn't translated. I am not speaking formally. Johal looked at her. I know, she said again. Outside the cultivation bay, through 2 pressure seals and 6 corridors, the station ran its routines. The customs officer filed its reports. The life support hummed at its slightly too low frequency. The yellow-white star continued its long, indifferent burn. In the bay, the bioluminescence pulsed, 68 beats per minute, steady as a clock, steady as something that had no reason to match a human heart but did. There are protocols, Kethalavar said finally, against what I am considering. I know, Johal said. I read them. All of them. All of them, she paused. I read the exemption clauses too. Kethalavar was still for a long moment. Then her antennae moved slowly, precisely, into the pattern Johal had been cataloging for 3 weeks and hadn't been able to name. She didn't need to name it now. She recognized it the same way she had recognized the light source through her viewport on the first night, not through study, but through something older and less translatable. The station hummed. The plants pulsed. 11 days was not nothing. It was not everything either. But it was what was currently true, and Johal had learned a long time ago that you started with what was true. She stayed. The star outside continued to burn. Neither of them said anything for a while, which was its own kind of language, and one that required no translation collar at all. On the morning of the 10th day, Johal received a transmission from the UN Xenorelations office. It was brief. The exchange had been formally concluded. She was to return by the following morning. The standard diplomatic courtesy applied. She would have until the 13th hour station time. She read the message twice. She filed the receipt confirmation. She set the message aside and finished her notes from the previous session, botanical observations, 17 pages, with cross-reference timestamps and a series of questions she had developed about the electrical substrate that she would not now have time to answer. Then she went to find Kethalavar. The princess was in the formal reception chamber, alone, standing at the end of a long table that had been set for 12 and occupied by no one. She was reading a document on a surface screen, her secondary arms folded, her posture the precise formal architecture of a high-caste Verath at administrative work, not the unstructured nearness of the cultivation bay. Something had reassembled itself. You received your recall, Kethalavar said without looking up. Yes. I also received notification. She set the screen down. The formal exchange record has been completed. Your documentation will be transmitted to the UN archive. This concludes the bilateral cultural exchange between the Alavar jurisdiction and Keth, Johal said. The formal language stopped. The antennae moved. I'm leaving tomorrow morning, Johal said. I wanted to say that before the formal end, not in a session, not in a document. There are protocols, Kethalavar said. Her voice was the same, her posture was not. The Alavar line does not, the third daughter of the line does not. I know what the protocols say. Johal crossed the room, 12 seats at a table built for formal distance. She stopped at the edge of the formal space and did not cross into it because she had read the protocols and she understood what she was standing next to. I'm not asking you to break anything. I needed you to know that I noticed you, not the jurisdiction, not the cast, you." The bioluminescence in the corridor outside pulsed faintly through the ventilation seams. 68 beats per minute. Steady. Kethalavar's antennae moved slowly into the pattern. The one Johal had spent 3 weeks cataloging and had finally, on the 7th day in the cultivation bay, added to her notes under a single word: longing. The exemption clauses, Kethalavar said, are rarely invoked. But they exist. They require a formal petition, a waiting period of 2 years, a review by. "I know," Johal said. "I filed the paperwork this morning." Silence, the kind that'd wait. "You filed it," Kethalavar said, "before I came to find you, because I didn't want to ask you to wait for something I wasn't already committed to." She paused. "That's probably a protocol violation." "It is not," Kethalavar said very quietly. "It is the opposite." The formal chamber was cold and large and built for 12 and occupied by 2. The star outside was the same star it had always been: old, indifferent, running its own schedule. In 2 years, if the petition was approved, the process would begin again. More documentation, more corridors, more protocol errors acknowledged and noted. Johal would be 34. The exchange record would be 8 years old by the time anything formal was possible. There were 17 documented reasons why the petition might be denied, and 3 reasons why it might not be, and she had written all 20 in her field notebook before she submitted the form, because that was the kind of person she was. She counted the costs before she paid them. She had paid them anyway. "Tomorrow morning," Kethalavar said. "Yes." The antennae moved one more time, a small motion, precise and deliberate, that Johal did not have in her notes and did not need to write down. She left at the 13th hour, station time, as scheduled. The customs officer processed her exit without incident. The decontamination chamber smelled like burned copper and something biological. She stood in it for the standard duration and did not sit on the floor this time because she was not waiting. She was leaving, which was a different thing and required a different posture. The transport bay was cold. The ship was already pressurizing. She walked up the boarding ramp with her bag and her 17 pages of botanical notes and 2 years of paperwork ahead of her, and she did not look back because she had already seen what she needed to see. The star burned outside the viewport as the ship disengaged, yellow-white, old and indifferent and still, somehow, warm. She opened her field notebook to a clean page and began to write.